I'm going to whiz you through what actually happened in the budget and the industrial strategy white paper. The first thing I would say is that I thought we did very, very well on a number of fronts. And we could not have done that without the input that we got from all of our colleagues across all of the councils and Innovate, who worked jointly as part of the strategy board to come up with some really good proposals that when it came to it in the autumn budget and the industrial strategy fund were ready to go, and we were able to announce them. So the big thing is the total amount of money we actually got in the budget. So this time last year, in autumn 2016, we actually managed to get an extra £4.7 billion. And if you look at these light blue shades, that's the total amount of money. What we actually got this year in the budget is a further year's money, and the additional amount of money went up from £2 to £2.3 billion. Now, this is good for two reasons. One is the money's going up, and secondly, we've got another year to plan. As you all know, having as much certainty about the future is really good in ensuring we get really good value research and innovation programs. The other thing that was announced shortly before the budget by the Prime Minister is a commitment that we will actually try and increase the spend on overall research and development by government and by business together to get to 2.4% of GDP. This is currently where we are, which is at just over 1.7% of GDP, and the commitment is to get us up to 2.4% over a 10-year period. Now, this is a very important challenge. It will require increased public spending, and we got the first bit of that in the autumn statement, but it's also going to require massive improvements in terms of business R&D. The work of Innovate UK will be absolutely essential doing that, but also it will require work across government on things like STEM skills, tax credits, regulation, to make sure we really get there. But this means that the future roadmap, which will be developed over the next year, is going to be really important to us, and we are absolutely critical as being one of the key players that's going to do this. It will absolutely put us on the forefront in terms of driving economic growth, improving societal impact, and absolutely critical to all of this underneath it all is making sure we have the good knowledge base. Now, in terms of what was announced in the Industrial Strategy White Paper, the most important thing was that the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, which we started last year when we announced £1 billion for 6 challenges, we announced another £725 million for further challenges, and these span the whole of the remits of the councils and Innovate, and are a really good way of showing that Innovate and the research councils are working together now to actually tackle some major industrial and society challenges of our time. The new ones we announced cover energy, transforming construction, transforming food production, early diagnosis and precision medicine, healthy aging, the audience of the future, which is very important, one of our first big creative challenges, and also quantum. The next one we announced is international collaboration, where we've actually announced a new £100 million fund to actually help form new international collaborations. When Sir Mark went to the States with Joe Johnson in September, they signed the first big US-UK agreement on research and innovation spending. There was one signed on China. This will allow us to develop new international collaborations, which will be absolutely critical in making sure we're well positioned over the next few years as we exit the EU. This money is not instead of any Horizon 2020 money or FP9 money, which is still being negotiated. It is in addition, it's a new fund. Then the next thing we announced was a new Regional Innovation and Growth Fund. This is something which we're working very closely with our colleagues in Research England, but the idea is that we try and spend some money to actually grow emerging strengths in R&D to actually drive economic growth and societal well-being, but very important that they're going to be based on existing excellence and where there's high-quality innovation. So we're not going to try and grow clusters where there is no strong base to grow them on. We're going to try and grow them on that strong base. The one thing that we did, which was basically with the money left over, is that we have said that we want to have what's known as a Strategic Priorities Fund. Now, this is not as well developed so far, in particular because we really want to keep this money to look at new ideas, new strategic priorities that cut across the councils, cut across Innovate, incentivise and fund interdisciplinary work. There'll be further work to develop that over the next year, and they'll be working across all the councils to think of new ideas, you know, new cutting edge stuff. It's all the things we haven't thought of so far, and that was announced as well. Then the last thing we announced, which I'm not going to talk about so much about now, is because Phil's going to talk about it a bit, is that we did have announced a new talent fund to fund more PhDs, more early career fellowships, and more chairs. The important of that is, I think that was probably one of the strongest areas of really good cross-council working. And with that, I'm going to hand over and let Phil talk about that a bit more. Is that okay? Oh, sorry. Oh, no, sorry. You're going first, Duncan. What do you want? All right. Go Phil first. Okay.
Thank you, Rebecca. And I think it's worth saying, actually, that the great result we've seen from that budget settlement is in large part due to Rebecca and her team, who've worked really well in corralling all the Research Council inputs together and making really strong cases up to government. So I think big round of applause for Rebecca and the team who've done that. So anyway, so it is all a very bright future. I have to say, we haven't seen anything like this since, I think it's 1979, since we got this sort of uplift in budget. So really it is a great opportunity. But I think we're also conscious that it also means a lot of hard work, that certainly across the councils we know that people have been working exceptionally hard this year and put an awful lot of effort in, especially into some of the new funding streams that have come on. So the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund and so on and so forth. Perhaps just a few words about that. What's been really good from my point of view is seeing the sort of teamwork that's gone in across the organisation. So when we've seen people from different councils and Innovate come together and put together really strong bids into the Industry Strategy Challenge Fund, and that's been really helpful in making sure that we can land these terrific settlements that we got out of government. But I was really asked to talk about the talent side of things, and John Saville and I have been leading a work stream on that, and we were delighted. We got 300 million, I think, allocated for developments in research talent. John and I started actually at what we thought was a pinch point in the career development path of academics, which was the sort of future leaders aspect of things, where people are really wanting to launch a new academic career, and we probably, you know, obviously we do our best in the councils already to try and support such aspirations, but we wanted to have a real good go at doing that and beefing up the sort of offers that we could make in a very flexible way. And so we're sort of, you know, we're well down the track now in working out how that might work. But again, it's going to take a lot of cross-council working to deliver it on behalf of UKRI. So that's a great aspect of the new talent fund. The other two dimensions to that, which Rebecca mentioned, one is looking at the sort of PhD level training and the sort of KTP approach that Innovate have used, and actually trying to get the best features of both of those schemes to try and come up with a sort of flexible, we're calling it a scholarship scheme that we might work up. We're conscious that that will be quite different to what's going on at the moment, so we're going to take some time over that and work up again a lot of consultation across council before we launch anything in that. In the meantime, we'll be doing KTPs and PhDs. Again, we were delighted this year to get 1,000 extra PhD students. That was great news that we got, and across the councils. So that's all heading in the right direction. As Rebecca rightly said, government's got a real emphasis on talent development at the moment, and that's going to be really important that we deliver those new funding schemes. The third of the funding streams was really for very senior academics. And again, councils have done a lot of this in the past, where we're recruiting or helping universities recruit very, very senior, experienced people. And we're in discussion at the moment with the national academies about all these funding streams, actually, to make sure we have a consistent package across the whole offering from the national academies and the research councils and Innovate, so that we can put together a big picture that really does look a very, a cohesive and compelling argument for making sure we continue to invest in research talent. So again, that's tremendously exciting. Lots of great things to be thought through, but again, not underestimating the work involved, because all this is extra. It's new work, it's new ways of doing things, But I think we're off to a flying start in UKRI, and I think there's a tremendously bright future for the organisation as a whole. So just a word of thanks from me. I know in my own council people have worked tremendously hard on a lot of these things, and I'm sure it's true across all the councils. So thank you so much for all the work you do, because I think it's been a great effort, especially during this year. I won't speak for any longer. I'm going to hand over to Duncan to let him reflect on what he sees as the future.
So thank you very much, Phil. I was asked to actually talk a little bit about open access and also say a few words about how a Research Council Chief Executive understands the new world. And actually, if I was to pick out a couple of the taglines here behind me, one would be a unified voice, and the other, I think, would be maximise our impact. The important thing, I think, to understand about UKRI compared with the past is how big we're going to be. And that means two things. One is that we're going to have a much more clout, but it also means that we're going to need to take, as it were, more responsibility and show a greater degree of leadership, both nationally and also internationally. So if I just pick on the question of leadership, open access is a very good example. Most of you, I'm sure, will know that the councils embarked on what was then a fairly radical open access policy about 5 years ago, and that policy has been pretty transformational in the effect that it's had both nationally and actually, more importantly, internationally. So 5 years ago, 20% of all academic articles in the UK were gold open access, and that number has moved in the 5 years of our policy to some 37%. Not only that, we have seen other movement internationally which is sort of following us, but we are still world leading. And that is in part because of the enormous reputation of the UK science base and its journals in the world internationally. Nonetheless, what has also happened is that the bill for publishing has gone up, and to some extent we are on a difficult path if we continue as we are. So the question then arises as to what we should do. And here, I think, is a very good example of how the clout of UKRI can allow us to be somewhat more ambitious than was the case in the past, and to think about how we now take the next step and move from 35% open access to around 70. So there was a paper that went through EXCO just a few days ago, where we will take a long review next year of our open access policy. And no doubt the exam question for us will be, how do we take the next step? How do we continue to show international leadership? And how do we use straightforwardly the clout of this new organisation, UKRI, to enable us to introduce more change than has perhaps been the case in the past? I think the other thing I'd like to touch on is this question of maximising our impact, and how, as it were, a council that should understand this new world and respond to it. I don't think there's much doubt, and we've just heard why, that there's considerably more opportunity. In fact, roughly speaking, twice as much opportunity as there used to be with the arrival of UKRI and the great success that's just been remarked upon about the increase in the budget. Nonetheless, this isn't more of the same, and along with the budget has come a larger challenge. With these kinds of sums of public money come responsibility, and comes a need to deliver more clearly than perhaps has been the case in the past. So I think that the question for people like me is, how do we, as it were, configure our organisations in this new world? And in that respect, we have a more or less one-off opportunity to reconfigure our organisations, in the sense that we have lived with structures of councils and boards more or less for the last 50 years. And we now have opportunity to think through quite fundamentally how we should structure ourselves for this new world. And if there's a word that is perhaps worth just observing to you about that, I think that word has to be generosity. We have been good at councils at ensuring the quality of our own domains. We've been perhaps less good at understanding larger scientific agendas that run across councils. And although people like me in the past have been good at saying we're good at this, actually we're probably not as good at it as we could be. And UKRI provides us a marvellous opportunity to do that if we can think more broadly and more generously than we have in the past. And that, I suspect, is probably the biggest challenge for us as an organisation and organisations in understanding how we engage with all of us in order to get this gain that is there, the prize that is there of even greater science than we've been able to deliver in the past. Does this have implications for all of us? I think it does. I think it means that we have to rethink our priorities. We have to move a bit from a world where we've just been, as it were, in control of our budgets to a newer world where we're both in control of some and attempting to influence others by joining together. And I also think that we need to get better at understanding the nature of the largest scientific challenges in front of us and how we bring our communities together to respond to them. There is, I must say, in the 5 years that I have, 6 probably, that I've been doing this job, the one thing that has frustrated me slightly is that the structures that we had didn't allow us to move together in a way that could respond to some of the largest scientific challenges. I now think that that opportunity is in front of us, and I personally strongly believe that we should grab it and continue to be the best research councils in the world. Thank you.